In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Look at My Star Trek Toys, a little weekly show where we talk about Playmates action figures made about Star Trek. I don't know why I couldn't say Playmates today, but you know what? I think it's because I'm feeling so much pressure, and let me tell you why, Mike. Because we are starting to talk about Playmates bigger toys. So we can't just be a 4.5-inch scale show today. We have to be a full 6-inch scale figure today because we are going to talk about the First Contact figures that Playmates put out coinciding with that movie. And guess what? They're bigger. So are you excited, Mike? Are you excited for the bigger toys?
Well, I'm sure they will be a differentiator because I feel like we're going to look at some of the same guys we've looked at in other lines, but that's part of the beast. I'm ready for it. Keith, I want to tell you, I have a trial subscription to Paramount Plus, which is now the home of all things Trek.
Yes.
And I've heard from some folks that this new animated Prodigy show is pretty cool.
Oh, really? I have not actually dipped in yet. But I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Now that you have Paramount Plus, we're going to have to start. So fans, help me get Mike into this, right? Help Mike become a bigger nerd. And here's my question. Should we start him on Next Gen? I'm assuming we start on Next Gen, but the first couple of seasons are a slog. I tried this with my wife, and she tapped out, like in the beginning of season 2. And
I am a fan of Next Gen. I've watched a bunch of miscellaneous episodes, so I feel like I have enough context to jump in later if there's a better insert point. Yeah.
So whether or not it's a hop in at the beginning of season whatever, or I think what I might do is curate like 8 episodes in season 1, 8 episodes in season 2 before you click into season 3 and just stick with it. So I think that might be the way to go. And once you're hooked, you're gonna go back and you're gonna watch Code of Honor and be very embarrassed. But I think that might be the right thing to do.
You said Deep Space was the place to start. Was the way to go?
Well, no, Deep Space is amazing, but I feel like you're better off if you go into Deep Space with the full Next Gen.
Can I also watch the animated ones made for children?
Sure.
Because that's really up my alley.
You can watch the animated ones. You won't get all of it because there's especially in
Janeway, I believe, is in it.
Janeway is in it. Excuse me. And in Lower Decks, it's basically just like 1,000 inside jokes.
Okay.
Which are super fun. But all right, so if you have any suggestions as to how to curate the first 2 seasons of Next Gen for Mike, comment down below. We'll be really excited to hear from you. But I know you're not here to listen to me try to talk Mike into watching Star Trek. You are here to see those figures. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about what we're going to see, because these are the first figures to show the new First Contact era uniforms, which I'm excited about because these are my favorite of the Trek uniforms that they developed for this movie and then was adopted in Deep Space Nine later in the series. In the episode Rapture was the first episode that they used these uniforms. And they did these for a couple of reasons. One, they were going to redesign the uniforms for Generations, and as we talked about in a previous episode, that didn't really pan out. So they just borrowed some from Deep Space Nine. It was awkward. It was weird. They made figures of them. There's an episode back there. Go check it out, because that's the only place you can see those new uniforms. So when First Contact came out, like, all right, no, we're actually going to do this for reals. And so they completely redesigned the uniforms, and I think they're amazing. So Ronald D. Moore, one of the producers, commented about these uniforms The gray and black were designed to give the Enterprise E crew a more military look that would have more texture and variations in usage and thus look better on the big screen, which I think they really do. You're going to start to see things like a little bit more fabric texturing, which you can see in the the high definition of movies. Now today, all of the TV shows are in high definition, so all that texture you see on the shoulders you can see on the screen. But again, back in the 90s, we were still looking at this at 480 tops, and so
it was like 96.
This was 96 that this movie came out. So the TV series all the way through the end of Voyager were still broadcast in standard definition. So you couldn't see the definition in the shoulders and such. So anyway, so if we go to Toy Cam, what I want to do is just walk through the progression of the uniforms. So we hear in the Playmates figures. So on the left here, we see Picard in his season 1 and 2 uniform, or relatively close to it. We did an episode on these. You can go back into our archives to find that. Then we move on to the classic uniform, standard duty uniform without the stripes. And of course, it's hard to see on the figure, but most of the differences was in the build of the uniform itself and how it fit on the actors. And somebody commented, I think it was JD's Customs, commented about how one of the reasons the uniform was so tight was Gene Roddenberry didn't believe in wrinkles. There was no wrinkles in space. It was sort of, it was a little bit like Star Wars is there's no underwear in space if you're a woman. At least in Gene Roddenberry, you were allowed to wear underwear. You just couldn't have wrinkles. And then, of course, here is Picard in the Deep Space Nine era uniform, which we only saw him wear in Generations. So here we are. It's 1996. Let's update this. Let's make it different. And boom, here we are with the movie era uniforms. It's a big change, even though structurally it's very similar to the Deep Space Nine era uniforms. We go sort of a gray and blue, blue and black gray sort of a deal. There's a lot of texturing details in the actual screen that we don't see here on the figure, but you get the basic idea. And we have texture on the shoulders, and that's what he was talking about, being able to see this in a higher definition. Whereas our division colors are now in the collar and the undershirt. We have for the first time division colors on the wrist, which was something they were going to develop into the Generations uniforms. They're actually going to do rank there as well, but they ended up just doing division colors, just a little pop of color on the wrist. So this figure, of course, is not the figure we're going to talk about. This is a Target exclusive that came out later, but just so that we're seeing things all in scale. And one of the things that I noticed while we were doing this, the Season 1 Picard, it's hard to tell here when they're lying flat, but it's about, I think Picard grew about 3 inches between figure from figure. So I'm not exactly sure how that happened. But Mike, do you want to see a real growth spurt?
Yes?
Yes, because here is the 6 inches.
Whoa!
Boom!
They say size doesn't matter, folks, but when it comes to Picard, it clearly does.
It sure does. So before we get into that, I think it's time to actually look at the first figure in this series, and that is going to be figure 16101. Of course, we're going to start with Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Let's have him beam in.
There he is. There he is.
There he is. So that is Picard there in his in the full 6 inches, and you can see on the screenshot there, really see the difference in the fabric texture. It's a little thicker. The mock turtleneck has a seam, and it is also thicker. Which,
I
again,
assume it's very cold in space, even on a ship, even with the climate control. So I'm glad that they've got something a little warmer.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no. And which is great for space. Probably not so great for the set on Paramount.
I would agree. Yep.
Under all of those lights, especially when they were filming the series and they were on, I forget what, stage something they called Planet Hell, which was dubiously air-conditioned at best. But anyway, so we have here the 6-inch figure, and the slightly larger figure gives you a lot of extra things you can do. So the detailing is better. I think the facial mold looks
Even
great.
Even the hair molding is better.
The hair molding looks great.
It's also very generous. Let's compare the. It's a very generous hair sculpt.
Well, it's a little thicker because Picard on screen is a little more buzzed. But anyway, it's Picard. It doesn't matter. But you'll notice after the Generations figures came out and they had very little articulation, and you didn't have elbow or knees, you couldn't turn in or out. These 6-inch figures have the full articulation. So you have elbows and you have knees, and you also have being able to turn in or out both on the shoulder and on the thigh. So these figures are pretty good figures. We can talk about whether or not I wanted them in 6 inches or would have preferred them in regular scale. But Mike, talk to me about your first impressions about the giant Picard.
So I have some questions, actually. I was going to say all the things you've already covered about it does offer us a much better view or much better canvas for sculpting. So obviously the likeness is a little better there, the detailing a little more specific. Though now all the other things we've looked at, the 4.5, were they also released in 6-inch, or was this sort of a unique for this line?
Excellent question. Yes, these, as a spoiler alert a little bit, the Next Gen cast was released in these uniforms, but not as a part of this line. When this came out, this was the only version you could get. And some of these figures are unique to this line and were not adapted to smaller versions. So I think for me personally, that was a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, if you already got a shelf of all your smaller figures, and you want to mix and match and you want to display them together, and all of a sudden you've got these giant ones next to them. That's a little incongruent.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that everybody is sort of questioning and wondering about what's going to happen with the new Playmates line is what scale are they going to be in? And are they going to have the same type of articulations? And I'll say this about these 6-inch figures. I really do appreciate that they are basically in the same style and vein and articulation of the smaller ones, right? Because if they were completely different, I wouldn't even be collecting them. Whereas these feel like variants off of the main. It's a different timeline, but it's still in the same universe.
Well, you bring up. I don't want to interject too much speculation, but you bring up a good point.
No, speculate. That's what we're here for. The internet.
Yeah, that's true. So it's clear that Paramount is throwing a ton of money to make it 1-to-1. I guess Disney is has their license with Star Wars. And so they're putting all those shows, releasing all those shows streaming, which offers up a whole bunch of different commercial opportunities. Vis-a-vis here, we've got Paramount throwing their weight behind the Trek universe and expanding the universe and different shows and such. So the question becomes, clearly they're going to release toy lines. Clearly they will touch some of the animated series, I would imagine, because toys is where kids are. But
I think they might be the priority. Yeah.
With all of these newer shows, they're putting a lot of money behind Discovery, even with sort of trying to push people over to being able to watch it on Paramount now, because it was, I believe, somewhere else before.
It was on. Well, the controversy is it was internationally. It was on Netflix.
Right. Now they're moving it all over to CBS All Access.
Now it's all going to Paramount Plus. Yeah.
But you've also got the Picard series, which I guess is a critical sort of, is middling critically, but
among fans, yes.
Yeah. So I think that, they're obviously going to release figures around that. So where are they going to put their focus, right? Are they going to try to please all comers at first? Or are they going to get a little more, I'm wondering where they're going to put their money and at what size. Are they going to completely redo their sort of creative design for these types of figures, or are they going to try to keep them in the same sort of grounded realism that these the ones we've looked at so far are?
Well, I get the sense from doing some Photoshop work on the teasers that trying various ways to see better what's going on there. They are going to try to stick with realism, probably more realistic than these. I don't get a sense of the scale or the articulation at that point. But it does seem like they are not going into the cartoon world, at least for the figures that were, I mean, the ones that aren't cartoons, obviously. The cartoon ones will probably be in cartoon world. Really interested to find out what happens. But while we're still back here in the timeline, let's take a look at the box that Jean-Luc Picard came in here. And you can see that obviously the box scale had to be a little different. Picard took up a larger piece of it. It came with a little poster and some choking hazards. And you'll see the box there. There is a little bit of a sculpt out on the top for the Borg little node dealies sticking out there. But
that's cool.
Still, a relatively basic box using the First Contact logo there, because it's interesting to have a box that is specific to one movie, just like the Generations one. Those are the only two in this line that were specific to a single movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they went back more to a painted version of our Borg here and the ship, as opposed to a little bit less photorealistic. Which, I'm not sure I'm a fan of, but they were going in sort of the art world there. And I get it. So so there it is. He came with a lot of similar choking hazards, obviously just sort of scaled up for the 6-inch figures. So let us move forward and take a look at some of the other ones in this line. We don't have to go into quite so much detail as we did with Picard, but we always talk about Picard for longest. And let us take a look at you know what? I want to add, for each of these, same thing we did with the original series movies. Let's talk about our favorite moments for each of these characters. And of course, for Picard, there's only one favorite moment, and it is, of course, from this movie. The iconic line that I turned into a jingle for our other series, that I play every time I make an unnecessary Star Trek reference. Not hard to explain. Here it is. The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther. Yes, and which was really, really fun before he sort of flips out. And what makes this movie so good is we're sort of dealing with his PTSD of having been abducted by the Borg, blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows the story. It's fun to have figures for this movie because it was probably the best of the Next Gen movies. All right. Well, now let us move forward and talk about figure number 16102, our lovable first officer, Commander Riker. Here he is. Okay, of course, this is Jonathan Frakes here in his new uniform. It's interesting that on screen, the shoulders look a little more purple, and the figure, they're most definitely gray. So hit me with your first impressions about Commander Riker here.
He looks a little beleaguered in the movie. Maybe he's gone through some things at this point. I haven't watched it in quite a while. I know I saw all of these in the theater, believe it or not, but I just don't remember anything about it. Good figure. The facial sculpture I find to be less, the likeness to be less accurate than Picard, but all in all, it's
he does have sort of a soft chin on the figure. You know what?
And his nose is a little bit different, and his
go
eyes
to
doesn't really match either.
And you can sort of see that he has Jonathan Frakes does not have quite such a soft chin. Uh-oh, toy cam's broken.
What happened? Did your phone turn off?
The stupid thing, whatever. All right, here we go. Now we can go back to toy cam.
Can we?
All right, he's coming. There he is.
All right.
So that's sort of a weak chin for Riker, and the nose goes down weird. They're letting the beard do most of the work here, but nonetheless, it's still a cool figure because of the uniform for me personally. Like I just love this uniform so much, I can forgive some of that. And my favorite Riker Jonathan Frakes moment from the movie series is not from this movie, actually, but from the movie Star Trek Insurrection, where it's a little cheesy and a little bit overdone, but in the battle scene, Riker creates the Riker maneuver, which,
much like the Heimlich maneuver.
Like the Heimlich maneuver, there's a Picard maneuver too, and now Riker has his maneuver. Is the finale of that movie feel a little ham-fisted because they rewrote it at the last section, at the last minute, because they realized there was almost no action in a movie? Yeah, but it's still cool. It looked cool. I mean, the visuals of that were really cool. So, Frakes is always he's such a charming person that I forgive it. Let's go blow some shit up in space. That's fun.
So when you say maneuver, you mean a combat strategic
maneuver? A combat
maneuver,
strategy.
Sort of
That's right.
Like the Queen's Gambit, but in space?
Yes, exactly. It's something like that. And he was expelling a gas that they blew up and blah, blah, blah. The ship, boom, boom, pew, pew. But it was fun. I really enjoyed it. There's our box here. And he came with usual stuff. He had the Type 2 phaser and the phaser rifle and the tricorder. A lot of guns.
Where are the choking hazards? Interesting that they're obscured here.
Yeah, they're tucked behind the poster, which is odd. Because you think you'd want to see them, but you can't. You're not allowed to see them, Mike. That's not how this works.
Okay.
Now, another little detail you'll see here that we're not going to talk about the ships because we have to. Someday, I hope to talk about the ships. But in the background picture, that's the new Enterprise. That is the Enterprise E, which they introduced in this movie because, spoiler alert, the D-gun blowed up in the last movie. So, a lot of new things for First Contact. New ship, new uniform, new look, new everything. So I think that's a good cue to go to a new figure. Let us go to figure 16103. Let's see Commander Geordi LaForge. Here he is. Now, Mike.
Wait a second, Geordi.
Yes, let's talk. Can you see a difference?
Is this where I guess Geordi got his new cybernetic eyeballs?
He did indeed, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's funny because in 1987, having a cure for blindness was so futuristic that it didn't matter what it looked like. But by the time 96 came around, we're like, yeah, that feels like a weird appliance now that we're, being able to start thinking about implanted technology and microcircuitry. This feels like a much more realistic version of what it would be like. So
now, Keith, did you know that First Contact is actually interesting? They were actually ahead of their time in predicting because Geordi was actually here given Jerry Orbach's eyes.
He was. Wow. That's it's amazing they stuck around for that long.
Yeah, they really did.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
well,
it was my joke not work? Wasn't it Jerry Orbach's eyes that were like the first to be transplanted or something like that into some person?
I have no idea. I was just going with you because I'm a good co-host. I'm sure.
I believe one of the first eyeball transplant surgeries was with using Jerry Orbach's eyes. Maybe I've just confused so many internet searches into a story that I've now just made up. But if not, I'm happy to have
whatever floats your boat, man. Whatever floats your boat.
Wow, a better YouTube show would actually just edit that out, but I'm not. I'm going to.
No. That's cool. I mean, it's certainly possible. It sounds truthy to me, but I was thinking that he maybe was part of the March of Dimes and was collecting glasses for folks as part of a charity work. Who knows? So
wait, hold on. The timing's not right, but the Broadway star Jerry Orbach donated his eyes when he died in December 2004, and they were given to two separate women. It seems. There you go. So the timing's off, but at least that was partially correct.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess that's better than LeVar Burton having them in a jar somewhere.
Anyway, what was
well, cool. Well done.
Remind me the story of how he got his new eyes.
No, we don't know. It happened off screen. He just shows up in. I mean, it's a movie, right? You don't have time for these subplots, and time has passed in between. He just sort of shows up, and they make reference to it. How it's.
Do you think
improved.
LeVar was like, "F this, I want my face on screen"?
I mean, it's possible. It's possible. I also think it just makes sense, both from a storytelling perspective, and of course, they use them in First Contact. He's able to zoom in with his eyes and look infrared, and we can sort of see an overlay, sort of Terminator view of Geordi being able to spot Cochrane on the run. So it makes a lot of sense. It's super cool. And it, of course, makes me wonder, like, all right, if that's available now, why wouldn't everybody have at least one eye that you can do all the fun stuff with? But we don't get into that. So the figure, obviously, has some differences. It's not your standard Geordi figure. Any other thoughts about the figure itself?
No, you know me, I love Geordi. So having finally a bit of a variant and letting us see his face fully sculpted instead of with as cool as the visor is, this change up I think is pretty unique. So I'm all for it.
And you'll notice on him here that for these scale figures, I think probably learning from their mistakes of the 4.5, or not mistakes, learning from convenience levels that they didn't sculpt the pips. So all the pips on this scale are painted, which I get it from a standpoint of now you're able to reuse the bodies a lot more easily. It does feel funny for all the detail and work they put into these and the sculpting to not have molded the pips. But it's that that way Picard and Geordi have the same body and legs. Picard and Geordi, actually, go to Toy Camp. Let's just for the heck of it, go and take a look at these. These are the same torsos, and you can see particularly well in the back. You can see the wrinkles there, and so I'm pretty sure it's just a repaint and rehead when you put these guys together, which is interesting. And then you have the larger ones. You have the Riker. I believe the Riker has a different sculpt, and they're going to use that on these slightly larger ones. We'll see that on Worf as well. So they only made, I think, 2 or 3 different bodies and just swapped heads out.
They were getting efficient, Keith.
Efficient, that's right. They were streamlining the process, even as they were going up to 6-inch scale. Well, let us streamline our process and go to our next figure, our first one out of uniform, because guess what? We are about to meet the creator of the warp drive, Zephram Cochrane, figure number 16109. Here he is. Guys, it's James Cromwell.
Wow, Crommy.
Here, Oscar-nominated James Cromwell for Babe, and he has 5 Emmy nominations, including 1 win. He has a long history with Star Trek individually. On Deep Space Nine, he was Hancock on Starship Down. On Next Generation, he played 2 different characters. He was Prime Minister Nayrock in The Hunted, and Jalem Shrek in Birthrights, Part 1 and 2, Shrek before Shrek came out. And he also had a habit, because I looked up his IMDb while we were doing this, of very similar titles. So he was on Star Trek The Next Generation. He was also on another Next Generation, and that is Revenge of the Nerds 3, The Next Generation. He was, and of course he got his Oscar nomination for the movie Babe. He was
That'll do.
Exactly. He was also in the movie The Babe. So, about the baseball player. So he was in Babe and The Babe. There it is. Whatever.
About the baseball player, he said.
About the baseball player. Yeah, exactly. Y'all know who I'm talking about. So here is the figure. Obviously, this is a unique sculpt to this figure because no one else is wearing this ridiculous outfit from apocalyptic times. tell me what you think. Hit me with your feelings about this figure, Mike.
It's cool. The costume, I guess, out of context, is a little bizarre, but cool. I wouldn't say it looks particularly like him. I guess as best you can do. I guess if I know, obviously, then it's fine. But once again, let me see the box. Let's see if the box presents it properly. Be nice if they did. It's interesting that they don't do the what we do here on the show, which is like present their picture. Well, they used to have them on the card, right? But here, not so much.
Right. They did not give out collector's cards with the First Contact.
It's cool. It's cool. It looks like he's fishing. He's a fisherman, like with the Native American jacket on.
He does look like he's fishing. No, he was fishing for warp drive and alcohol, and ancient music, boogie woogie, ancient music.
Wow,
it's so silly. So a couple things to note about this figure. Now, of course, because they're not going to ever reuse this sculpt, they saved a couple bucks here with articulation.
Mm-hmm.
He has no shoulder articulation. He has no knee or elbow articulation. But interestingly, he can turn out. He does have thigh articulation, which is an interesting one to sort of choose to use. But it does make it a little easier trying to get him to stand up on a turntable, which is the bane of my existence. Getting these things not to fall over on the turntables every week.
Sometimes not so much.
So, well, I don't want to use the stand. I think it looks better without it, but sometimes I have no choice. Because especially the female characters have such tiny feet. They go flying every single time. But yeah, so I think it's a good figure to have to commemorate the importance of Zefram Cochrane and James Cromwell. James Cromwell, with all of that Star Trek, deserves his own figure here.
Yeah, fair.
For me, speaking personally about First Contact, I loved First Contact. It's so good. I was not a fan of the costuming of the back in time post-apocalyptic. The costuming looked a little silly to me, and I don't really know exactly what I'm looking for. And it's, it wasn't quite a Mad Max situation. And of course they'd all be wearing civilian clothes. It's just a general comment for Star Trek. Their uniforms look so awesome and their aliens look great, but their regular human civilian clothes always look a little weird to me. So it just doesn't look cool. And you kind of want somebody this important to look cool.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Even though the movie itself is so good. Jonathan Frakes directed it, did an amazing job. But that's it's just one of those things. It's not for me. Maybe it was because it was the 90s. And even though they were telling a different time period, they were still sort of tied to the horrible 90s clothes. My favorite moment for Zefram Cochrane here. Oh, and I forgot to say what my favorite moment was for Geordi in the movie series.
Well, let's go Geordi first.
Let's go Geordi. All right, so favorite moment for Geordi was actually related to his eyes. I can't believe I didn't remember to say it. But in Star Trek Insurrection, when they're on the planet there that has the rays that heal you or whatever, in a way that makes no sense logically, because his eyes weren't real to begin with. How could they heal and become human? And wouldn't the cybernetic parts be rejected and he'd be screaming in agony? But instead, what happened in the movie was his eyes sort of repaired themselves and he was able to see like we do for the first time. And LeVar Burton gets a great sort of acting moment being able to watch a sunset with his regular human eyes. And so it was a great character story beat, even if it made no sense from a technological standpoint. And all right, so my favorite James Cromwell and Cochrane story was, of course, him taking a leak, because it is a long-running gag on Star Trek that nobody ever uses the bathroom. In fact, you never see a bathroom. You see sinks in people's quarters, but there's never a toilet. We don't even know what happens with any bathroom-related things. But he sneaks out to take a leak, and everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And not knowing the phrase "take a leak." So I thought it was silly. I liked the little inside joke in that movie. All right, so we've been talking for forever, but I think we should see one more figure before we have to take a little pause before part 2 of the Insurrection figures, and let us see the big baddies. Figure number 16108, the Borg.
Yes.
I knew you'd be excited for this one. Yes, indeed. So, story-wise, of course, the Borg are back for this movie and take over the ship and blah, blah, blah. Everyone's seen the movie if you're watching this show. But it's very exciting to see the figure here and all of the detail they were able to get into on this larger scale. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you just said. This is a figure that really benefits from the extra detailing. Look at all of the circuitry, the cut-ins. The human-ish hand, zombie hand, is awesome. So cool. The sort of facial technology, the helmet piece, all of it, really cool. Really digging this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really cool figure. The sculpting is amazing. The hand, though, definitely not human, because if you go to Toy Cam and you can see the scale of that hand versus James Cromwell, I just choose to believe that's not a human, that it is some other species that has giant friggin' hands.
I want somebody to write fanfic about this screenshot right here. Like, what is happening here?
I should apologize to somebody for that. Hey, look, as long as it's mutually consensual, go to town with your bad selves. Anyway, and the other hand can get involved too. Who knows? But there is the box, and of course, he has the same Borg stand that he stands on that we see on the smaller figures, just scaled up. So the stands that these figures were on also naturally were scaled up to the 6-inch scale. But yeah, the one thing about this figure, it feels like a very odd missed opportunity not to have a figure of the Borg Queen, who is the main antagonist in the movie. I mean, it's a bit of a spoiler, right? Because we have never had an individual Borg to communicate with before at this point. But come on, the Borg Queen is so cool. And they eventually do make her in the 4.5-inch scale, which I'm glad that they did. But if they're going to release this series, no offense, Zephram Cochrane, I'd much rather have a Borg Queen than I would a James Cromwell wearing weird homeless clothes. So, yeah, but I feel like that was a missed opportunity. But I'm happy that we got this Borg. Very, very cool. Any other thoughts on the first part of the First Contact toys, Michael?
I don't know that I have thoughts. I would say my Borg is my fave so far, as you could probably guess, because I like them weird. I like them freaky. And I think that member of the Borg Collective really gave me my weird and freaky, especially with whatever you were setting up there. But maybe you've got some more fancy special things for me in store next week, Keith. A question.
I do indeed.
We're talking about First Contact. If any of our viewers would like to make First Contact with us, how could they go about doing that?
You know what that was? That was a first-class segue. First-class segue. Well, first off, it's really simple. It's real easy. Just comment down below. And while you're at it, do us a huge favor, like and subscribe. We need subscribers so that we can actually, get paid for this, which we would love to do at some point. So by all means, please subscribe and tell your friends who would enjoy this particular brand of nonsense. You could also reach out to me directly, and Mike, although I'm usually the one checking it, at lookatmystartrektoys@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at Star Trek Toys. Very simple. Just like that. So, and what's that? The notification? Oh, yeah. Smash the notification bell. That's the thing I always forget to say because I'm old and I don't understand YouTube and technology. But that's it. So, folks, thank you for watching Look at My Star Trek Toys. We will see you back next week with part 2 of Giant figures. We will see you then.
Look at my Star Trek toys!
Thank you for watching KME Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe.